Awesome. Thank you, Alex. All right, I'll do my best to try to split my gaze between the laptop and in person since we have a lot of people remote. All right, so yeah, I'm Matt Spettel, co-founder, CEO here at Trainwell. John's over here. And we're going to talk today basically about direct-to-consumer user acquisition. It's a sort of a mysterious topic that I certainly didn't know anything about when I was sitting in the chairs here. And we get asked a lot of questions about it. And so it's always fun to come back and just talk through our experience, how we approached finding those first few users, and hopefully giving you guys some actual actionable frameworks you can use to grow your own businesses through these different stages of early growth. Oh, what am I? Let me go. There we go. I got it. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, I'm Matt. This is John. We run Trainwell. John was our number one employee at Trainwell back in 2019, 2020. So it's been 5 years now, and we founded the company end of 2018, beginning of 2019. So been at it for a little over 6 years in total now to date. And just a little bit about Trainwell. So yeah, over the last 6 years, we've served about 52,000 clients with a product that is essentially remote one-on-one personal training. We employ a bunch of personal trainers full time, and then we build tools and systems for those trainers to use to work with people all over the globe at this point and to help them reach their fitness goals and stay accountable. Happy to talk more about that product if you have questions about it, but we're not going to spend too much time talking about Trainwell specifically today. But just to give you a sense of where we are in terms of stage, we've raised 3 rounds of venture capital totaling about $17 million. And today the business is doing, or the direct to consumer part of the business is doing about $13 million a year in recurring revenue. So at the highest level, you guys probably have heard this in a bunch of different versions so far, but at the highest level, what you need to grow is some level of product market fit, which I sort of break into two components. One of them is you need a differentiated solution to a very painful problem. Painful is definitely the most important part there. It's really easy to solve a problem. It is relatively difficult to solve the most painful problem someone has. And then once you have that, or at least in theory, once you have that, the second thing you need is you need access to the users who actually have that problem as their number one problem. And you need a reliable way to get in front of them and give your product to them. So in today's talk, we're going to be focusing on this. I think there's a bunch of really good talks and resources out there already that talk about that first one of like, how do you even decide what problem to solve? How do you build a solution? But it's, at least from my perspective, it was always a lot more mysterious of like, okay, now what? Like, how do I actually bring this in front of people? So we're going to talk about that. Eh. And here's just a quote from one of the more famous VCs, sort of describing what you will experience when you truly do have product market fit. We always like to say we do. We always say we do. Do we? I still don't know. But essentially, it's this sensation of the market is pulling you along. People are pulling the product out of your hands, asking how they can use more of it, asking how they can give it to other people. And until you've achieved that level of you're struggling to keep up with your own growth, I would definitely encourage you to go back to the fundamentals and invest in those two core areas. So this first phase, I'll be handing it off to John to talk about your very first 100 customers. And just we also, since every person has, or every business has customers that pay different amounts of money, just I would say these tips, I would say generally apply to businesses that are doing less than $100,000 a year of revenue. But yeah, I'll hand it off to John to talk about that first phase.
All right, thank you. I think we have some people in the waiting room too, so I might try to admit them, maybe not. All right, so how do you get your very first customers, those first few customers? And really the main piece of philosophy that I use and want to share with all of you is do things that don't scale. So do anything you really can think of to try and get your very first customers. Don't necessarily try and come up with a brilliant marketing plan to reach thousands of people. Just do things that let you get in front of one person that might actually buy your product. So use your networks, reach out to friends, family, reach out to people on LinkedIn, connect with people that you think might be interested in trying out your service. talk to them as much as possible. It'll likely be very manual and it'll probably take longer than you will expect it. Many people, they think they come up with a really great idea for a business, or they have a great idea, they have a great product, and they think it'll sell itself. But once they actually get to that stage of, okay, who's going to buy this? It's sometimes trickier than, or takes longer than you would initially expect. For us, for example, it took us 9 months of dedicated, all of us really working on trying to get our first customers. It took us 9 months to get 100 clients for us, which is quite a lot of time of 3 people working endlessly trying to get those customers. So do things that don't scale, reach out to anyone you can and really talk with people. The more in-person, face-to-face conversations you can have, the better, because you can get a lot of really valuable feedback, criticism, iterate on your pitch to those people very quickly with in-person, just talking to customers. So what do I mean by do things that don't scale? This list on the slide is a list of all, just a fraction actually, of the things that we tried to get customers in the very early days. And they're examples of things that don't really scale. So we literally set up a folding table on a street corner and just talk to random people, trying to get them to sign up for the service. Force your friends and family to buy it. The first customer I ever got for the business was my sister. We literally gave away free Apple Watches. You might not be able to do that, but fortunately, we were able to have some extra Apple Watches to give away to people who would actually sign up for our product. We manually scraped some alumni databases and sent handwritten letters to them, trying to get them to sign up. We did a bunch of other things that were very manual and not necessarily scalable at all, but each of them got us maybe 1 or 2 people to sign up for our product. And that's all you really need in the early days, is just some initial traction, some initial signal, some initial feedback from customers. And with all of this initial iteration, big thing is just talk to your users often. The first few sales should be as manual as possible because it gets you a ton of that face time that I was talking about before. With your customers, you can have those one-on-one conversations so you can deeply understand their problems and how you can better solve those problems. It also lets you learn what they've tried to do in the past to solve this problem that they have, and how your product or service can be differentiated from those other things, and how they might be similar. One final piece of advice that I always have with this do things that don't scale is to read a very short book. You can get a free copy, a free PDF copy online these days of the book, The Mom Test. It is very quick, and it is a great resource for trying to figure out how to have these conversations with your initial customers, so that you're not wasting time, and actually getting a lot of value from those first discussions. Okay, so you've done a bunch of manual sales, you've gone to everybody you possibly know and tried to get them to buy your product. Now you have a few hundred customers, or maybe 100 customers at most. How do you get to that next scale of 100 to 1,000 customers? And these are some pictures from us in the early days when we were in the midst of those first initial traction moments. So step one is trying to find a actual channel of reliable acquisition for customers. So what is a growth channel? A channel is what connects your product with potential customers. And at the highest level, a channel is a place where you can get impressions or views of your product or service and attempt to convince people to buy it. So a channel is where you're going to get actual customers. It can be a lot of different things, and we'll talk about some examples of channels in a second. But it is how you are getting in front of customers and trying to convince them to purchase your product or service. So how do you find a channel that works for you? What I'll be going over today is the actual framework step by step that I have used now, not just with Trainwell, but with my previous startup, to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in initial sales, in traction, And I'm taking it from this founder, Gabriel Weinberg. He's the founder of DuckDuckGo, the search engine, and he's written a book on it, Bullseye Framework. It is pretty straightforward. We'll go through each of the initial steps, but basically in this book, he posits that there's 19 types of general channels that you can use to acquire customers. So these are the 19 channels. I won't list them all or read them all off. You can see them. But they're all very broad categories of ways to get in front of potential customers. The ones bolded are the ones that have been very important and impactful for Trainwell, especially in the early days. So search engine marketing, that's like running ads on Google searches. Social and display ads, that's like Facebook ads, Instagram ads. Existing platforms, that's a very broad category, very broad channel. For us, influencers kind of falls within that category of existing platforms because we're leveraging their existing audience and platform to reach more people. But there's a lot of other channels in this group, and they're all very broad. So within each of these channels, there's a lot of other subcategories that you can go into to try and acquire customers. Yes. So SEM is putting actual ad dollars into Google Ads or any search platform and say, hey, I want to show up for these results. Where SEO is optimizing the content on your website so that the search algorithm for Google organically shows your contact for certain keywords. So if you search gym near me, your fitness gym would show up organically for that search term. Or if you paid ads for it, you could show up at the very top, but that's you paying for as an ad. Yeah. All right. So these are the 19 channels, and these are all the potential areas that you could acquire customers through. So how do you find a channel that works for you? All you really need is one channel. That's it. You don't need all 19. You just need one that works for you. One important note as we go into how do you find which one will work for you is do not dismiss any one of those 19 channels. There's a lot here, and you may have already, for your business, said, oh, that won't work for us, or that's not really something that people in my business do, or that's antiquated. That's not the kind of mindset you want to have going into testing out these channels. You want to potentially explore all of these channels, and there could be a lot of underutilized channels or some hidden gems that are not used by your competitors or other people in your industry that might work really well for you. So don't dismiss any of them offhand. Really go through each of the channels as you're trying to find one that works for you. So the first step in determining what kind of channel will work best for you is you'll have 3 questions that you'll be asking yourself as you evaluate all of these channels and test them out. Those 3 questions are, okay, for this given channel, what is the cost to acquire a single customer from that channel? And that can be in time, in resources, and obviously in money to acquire one customer. Second question is how many potential customers are available within that channel? And then third, are these the types of customers that I actually want? And so we'll go through each of these questions and talk about exactly what they mean. But these are the 3 questions you want to have in your mind as you go through each of those 19 channels, trying to assess what might work for your business. So the first question, how much does it cost to acquire a customer? This is just how much money do you have to put into that channel to get one customer out? Or how much time and effort needs to go into that channel for you to get one customer out? Early on, like I said, when you're getting those first 100 customers, you're going to be putting a lot of time and effort and maybe even money to get your first customers, and that's okay. But as you try to find a scalable channel or a channel that you can use to reliably get customers, you'll need to know, okay, how much exactly does it cost to get one customer out of this channel? How many customers are available in that channel? So this is good for planning future tests and comparing one channel against other channels. Some channels you might be able to get very inexpensive customers from, but it's not scalable or it's not repeatable. So you might only be able to get a handful of customers out of that channel, and then it will not work for you going forward. So it's an important question to have on your mind when comparing channels. So is this scalable? And finally, are these the types of customers you want? Do these people really need your product? Are you solving a painful problem for them? Are they referring your product or service to other people that they know that have a similar problem? And would these people be very disappointed if you completely stopped offering your product or solution? These are the types of questions that you want to ask yourself, making sure that you're reaching the right people for the product and how you're positioning that product. Okay, so we have these three questions. Now let's actually go through and implement the framework that Gabriel Weinberg uh, has listed. So step one for me is just make a massive spreadsheet with a bunch of ideas. So literally, I have a giant Excel doc that has 19 different tabs, and each tab is a different channel. Within that channel, I list out every possible idea I could think of, ideas that I get from other startups, ideas that I've come up with myself, things that have worked in the past for me. I list out all the potential ways that I could get in front of somebody within that channel. Then, once you have this massive list of 19 channels and all of these different ideas within each channel, go through each idea, each test idea, and ask yourself those three questions. So, how much does it cost to acquire a customer in that given channel? How many potential customers are available in that channel? And are these the types of customers that I would want? And then you won't have all of the information, obviously, until you actually test out some of those ideas, but you'll have somewhat of a sense, probably initially, before you're even testing anything, of the answers to those three questions. And you can start ranking your ideas based on the answers to those questions. So then you just kind of target the ideas that are easiest to implement with the most potential upside. So they have the lowest potential cost to acquire a customer, the most customers available, and they're all customers that you want. And they're relatively easy to do, and you can test a lot of them. So just prioritize those as the first ones you actually go out and do. And then finally, you just do it. You go out and test all of those ideas that you had. And as you start to test them, you'll collect data and you can use that data to answer those three questions. So, how much is it costing me to acquire a customer? Are these the types of customers I want? And how many potential customers are available? You'll get more and more data, and that will help you as you test your ideas. And then, how do you know that you've tested a channel? There's a million different ways to test a channel, a million different ideas that you can have within each of those 19 channels. So you want some guiding framework to help you know if you've tested something. You can always come back to a channel or an idea later, but you don't want to get stuck trying the same thing over and over again. So a single test probably shouldn't take more than a month. Usually it'll just take a day, maybe a couple days to test one idea. Rarely should it take at all a month. Usually it should be much, much quicker. And probably, again, this is very broad. It depends on your business and your circumstances. But broadly, for a consumer business, it probably shouldn't cost more than $1,000 to test your idea. Another guiding principle is if you know what your cost to acquire a customer is or what your ideal cost to acquire a customer is, you can test something with 3x that spend. So if it's $100 to cost it to acquire a customer, you can spend maybe $300 to $500 to test an idea. Again, very rough estimate. It depends on your business. But sometimes the channel may require multiple tests. But don't feel, again, attached too much to any single channel. You don't want to spend too much time just spinning your wheels on one idea. And finally, yeah, at Trainwell, we performed over 55 channel tests before discovering one that really worked. So it can take a lot of iteration. Don't feel discouraged. Try and focus on ones that are inexpensive and that you can move through quickly to find something that sticks. And now I will pass it back to Matt to talk about scaling from 1,000 users up.
Cool. Thank you, John. So yeah, now we're going to sort of assume that we've identified a channel or a small group of channels that seem to have some promise. They've gotten us to 1,000 users, maybe $1 million a year. in revenue. And now the question is, okay, how do we really start to pour the gas on? How do we systematize this? How do we, I mean, 10 million obviously is the next order of magnitude, but really startups are shooting for hundreds of millions, if not billions of revenue in many cases, right? So really setting ourselves up for the future. So just reiterating something John said is that most companies get the majority of their scale from one channel. And I would even say like two channels probably accounts for like 90% of growth for like almost every company. So most companies are not, they'll talk about a lot of channels when you ask them, but when you actually really dig in and say like, okay, where did all your users come from last month? Like when the truth comes out, almost every time we've had these conversations, it's 80% one channel, 20% another, and then like a fraction of a percent the stuff that they like talking about on LinkedIn, right? So for example, almost every company will tell you that all their growth comes from some sort of organic thing. When you actually get the answer, it turns out 70% of it is from Facebook ads, for example. That's a classic. So yeah, we're gonna just learn a bit about how we would optimize and scale up this process. So this is an example of the core components of a growth funnel, which is essentially the thing that you'll want to tack on to whatever channel you find. So for example, for the sake of example, let's use influencers since that's one of our main channels. So you have the top of the funnel, which is all of these impressions that are coming to your website or your app from influencers. They are getting you the impressions. That is the fundamental job of the channel, is you just put people in that block. From there, we have some percentage of them that click whatever link the influencer gives them to go to our landing page. Then from there, some percentage create an account. From there, some percentage buy the product or start a free trial or whatever it is. And then some percentage of those truly retain on the product, love the product forever, generate a bunch of recurring revenue. And you'll see there's a bunch of different words you can use for all these different steps, right? Click-through rate, conversion rate, retention rate. And you'll also notice that there's mechanisms that bring people back into the funnel if they happen to leave, right? So if you hit a landing page and then leave, we've all experienced this as consumers. If you happen to go to some random, let's say you are looking for a hammer for a home improvement project, then randomly the next time you're on any website, all the side panels are just hammers, and you're like, what is going on? This is so weird. That's a retargeting campaign. Very easy to set up nowadays. Then there's drip campaigns where once you have someone's contact information, you can send them emails. I'm sure we all get 1,000 of those every day. And then lastly, if someone's already paid you, been part of your system, you can then do reactivation campaigns, which can be all of those things combined, to try to get them to come back to the product to pay you again. So this whole system, you'll build up these components, you'll run tests to iterate them and improve them over time. Yeah, and this is just what I said before of all of your channels are leading to that first block. So it becomes this big system with channels leading into a funnel. Okay, so let's talk about advertising specifically. This is one of the most common buckets of channels. So this would be like, it could be more traditional advertising, like, a billboard, for example, but it could also more commonly nowadays be a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad. And the main thing that we want to look at here to optimize this system is the three dimensions of pretty much any ad. One of the dimensions is copy, which is the text that the ad has, or like the actual English or whatever language, message you're putting on it. The creative is, you can think of that as the image or the video or the brand or the colors of the ad that actually give it some sort of physical presence. And then the audience is obviously who we're showing the ad to. On platforms like Facebook, you can be super, super specific, like show this to 26-year-old men in Tokyo, right? Like who also work in this kind of industry. If you're doing something more like a mail flyer or a billboard, obviously you have less control over audience, but you can still have some level of control. So what you want to essentially do is optimize across these three dimensions and test across these three dimensions until you find a local sort of optimum. So that's kind of what this goes through, is you always want to make sure those are aligned. So for example, if you're trying to sell to like for us trying to sell to a busy professional, we might have the creative is a businessman, like looking stressed out or something. The copy is struggling to fit a workout into your busy day, and then the audience that we're targeting is high earners by zip code in a certain geographic area, right? And those three things together, like Will that work? Who knows? We'll have to test it, right? But it at least logically makes sense on paper. So when you're testing these different formulations of copy, creative, and audience, just make sure that each permutation you're testing like logically makes sense. And then you can you can actually measure the performance of these against each other and try to find ones that perform better or worse. Just some other random general tips. In general, videos do have better performance than stills, although most brands do still use a mix of both. So if you're getting started, you can definitely start with stills. You definitely want to try to leverage what's called a lookalike audience. If you're using digital marketing, you can essentially take an email list or just a list of visitors to your website and feed it into Meta and say, go find me more people like this, right? Or best case, you have a list at this point of thousands of people who have bought your product, and you can give them that list and say, go find me more people like these ones who actually bought the product. And then you can get much more efficient campaigns over time by Facebook essentially closing that feedback loop for you. And the last one is use ads with an objective. Like Facebook will always try to convince you to run ads for like clicks, views, like these very, very high level metrics because they know they're fully within their control. They can definitely get you clicks, they can definitely get you views. But really what you want from advertising is conversions. You want revenue dollars in the bank. And so the farther along you can have that measurement point be that sort of objective. For example, we measure the point at which someone starts a free trial and puts in their credit card. That is essentially the point that we're using to measure how efficient all these channels are. Influencers, another big one for us. So just to go through some like tactical tips on how to make influencers work. So the big one is just clearly define what you want your influencers to do over what period of time and what you want them to say. So we have probably at this point over 2 pages of very, very specific requirements of exactly what influencers need to do. It's definitely a lot like herding cats. John definitely knows that too well. I think we've worked with many hundreds of influencers at this point, probably spent close to $10 million on influencers. And so we have done this a lot, and it definitely never gets easy, right? You're still always going to be working with these individuals who fundamentally aren't the best all the time about doing the things that you want them to do. So you need to have a very, very proactive, specific approach where you get very, very detailed commitments from them about what they're going to do. Second biggest thing, make sure that the influencers you're working with are capable of developing like an emotional connection with your brand and product. We've all seen the very painful to watch in YouTube videos where they're talking about, I don't know, some new electronics thing, and then suddenly they're like, record scratch. Okay, let me tell you about today's sponsor, NordVPN, right? And you're like, there's no connection at all, right? And you're like, skip, 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 skip. So those don't work, obviously. At least they don't work for us. And the ones that we found work well are the ones where the video itself, let's say, is about someone's journey with fitness through a certain hardship in their life. And then the entire video is about fitness, and it's about them working through these challenges and making progress. And then the sponsor segment is, oh yeah, and today's sponsor is actually the trainer that I used to do all of this, right? And obviously some people still skip it, right? Maybe even most people still skip it, but people who actually care, like, oh wait, what did they use? Like, I want to know what this trainer thing is. Like, that sounds interesting. Those people will watch that ad segment, and those people sign up for our service with a pretty good success rate. In the early days, especially, expect about 50% of influencers to just fall through. Don't be afraid to terminate them if they're really not doing what you want them to do, or they're just not creating deliverables. And then, yeah, treat influencers just like social media ads. So you still have copy, you still have creative, and the audience is essentially their audience, right? So the exact same thing we just talked about still applies to influencers. It's not just oh yeah, we picked a random influencer. Hopefully they'll say the right things and hopefully the stars will align. Maybe you could eventually get lucky doing that, but really you want to maximize your odds by being very intentful about this influencer has the kind of audience we're going after. These are the exact things that we want them to show and say in that video because we know those things are going to resonate with that audience. And when you can align all of those things, it can become quite effective. zooming out back to sort of our funnel and thinking about all these different ways we can feed traffic into the funnel, there's a lot of data science involved in this step. But it's nothing that John actually does have a data science degree. So he's helped us a lot with this. But even if you just have a basic understanding of division, I would argue you can do this. So a lot of it is just measuring the different rates at which people move through these steps, right? But marketing people love to give all of these things different three-letter acronyms just to make it sound more complicated. So just to like demystify that a little bit. So at the highest level of acquisition, you have CAC, which is cost to acquire customer, and then lifetime value, which is LTV. Then when you get into the different levels of a funnel, you see things like CPM, which is the cost for 1,000 impressions. You get CPC, which is the cost for a single click. You get a bounce rate, which is the rate at which people, you can measure it either way, but it's the rate at which people leave your site very quickly once they come to it. So if you have a 50% bounce rate, 50% of traffic just hits your site and then immediately leaves. Then you have just like a drop off or a click through rate or a conversion rate at every single step of your onboarding funnel. And then you have a purchase rate or a conversion rate for actually putting in a credit card. And then you have your retention rate and a churn rate for how well people actually stay with your product. If it's a subscription product, if you're selling a one-time product, that's a little less relevant. And then you also have viral mechanics like NPS, which is Net Promoter Score, which is just a certain way of surveying essentially how likely your customers are to share a product with another. Referral rate, you have a K factor, which is essentially how many users the average user brings into your platform. So if you have a K factor of 1, every user who joins your platform brings another user. So then you start having these kinds of viral growth effects. So John kind of already said this, but in order to be able to test and validate and iterate all of these variables and all these different steps, at this point, you will have to be ready to commit a significant amount of capital to actually see results and learn. So in general, it's the sort of 3 to 5x the CAC that you're shooting for, like John said, is what you'll want to spend before you understand if something at any of these steps is actually better or worse. And then obviously you can also just measure statistical significance given, if you're doing an A/B test, like how many people in the treatment, how many people in the control, what's the conversion rate of the treatment, what's the conversion rate of the control, and you can just do like a t-test to see if it's statistically significant. And sort of last little section here is just, okay, that all sounds great, but like, how does this actually work in startup land? Like, how do you actually execute this in practice? And this is sort of a high level summary of what we do. So, in a given week on the growth team, you could have something like this, where on Monday, you come up with some hypotheses for these different steps of the process where we think we could be better. We design some kind of high level experiment and we start building some easy design assets, some little engineering tweaks here and there to be able to validate it. And then by the sort of middle to end of the week, we've actually finished building that. By Friday, we've tested it. And by Friday or maybe into the weekend, we can launch that experiment and start measuring results. And then we let it run for anywhere from a week to 3 weeks to just collect data and sort of see if it's better or worse. And then when we can look at that data and say, either there was no statistical difference or it was statistically better or statistically worse. And then obviously if it's statistically better, we say, great, that's the new normal. Okay, now what's the next experiment? And since each of these cycles only takes a week or sometimes even less than a week, you can stack a bunch of them together. So like you can have many experiments running at once, and you can be concluding many experiments every day, every week, and you can get a lot of iteration going really fast. So we're still like a relatively small team getting good at this, but like Duolingo, for example, a local company here, runs about 300 of these at once across their app and across their acquisition channels, right? So, and it's no surprise that Duolingo has had compounding and explosive wins in their growth over the last 5 years because they're really good at this process. And last section, hiring for growth. So there's sort of like 2 common mistakes with hiring I see. There's relatively non-technical people who are looking to hire someone to build the entire product for them. And then there's relatively technical people who are looking to hire someone to solve all of growth for them. Fortunately, we were the technical people and we hired John, and he was actually really, really good at it. But it's definitely a risky trade-off where I do believe that the founders or like the very first employees, like in John's case, should be intimately involved in solving this problem. It is very much not something you can just outsource and hope for the best. Like I would say avoid agencies almost at all costs in those early phases, unless if you're really starting to scale and you just need to deploy a huge amount of effort behind a certain channel. Agencies will always promise that they can grow you like crazy, but at the end of the day, they're not going to be the ones doing this, right? Agencies are much, they try to do this a little bit, but like they're slow. They're definitely not doing 300 at once, right? So like if you want to master your own growth, you have to take some ownership over it. I'd say in general, at the early stage, you want to hire generalists rather than someone who, for example, is super, super good at Instagram influencers and that's all they've ever done for the last 5 years. Like, that's great if you have already proven out Instagram influencers as a channel. But if you haven't, you might spend 3 months hiring and onboarding this person only to then run a few tests and realize that Instagram influencers don't work that well for your business. And then it's like, okay, this person now is not very useful. It's much better to have generalists like John who can go and quickly iterate through dozens and dozens and dozens of channels, find something that works, and then build a team underneath them who can really scale the execution and ramp it up. So in closing, we've got do things that don't scale at the beginning. Don't expect anyone else to solve your growth for you. Like take ownership over it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be intimidated by it. When you're ready to do that, use the bullseye framework to iterate through those 19 different channels and find something that works. And then once you find something that works a little bit, embrace your data science side and just run a ton of experiments to optimize the performance of that channel and that funnel at every single step along the way. And here's just sort of a summary of the resources. Obviously we'll send out these slides. The book that the framework comes from, a bunch of articles around it, and then the mom test that John mentioned. And like John and I are both local here in Pittsburgh. We're both around the Schwartz Center on probably almost a weekly basis at this point. So if you guys have more specific questions, obviously you can ask us now, but also happy to meet with people, kind of go through what you're working on and just try to be a thought partner. Like we don't have the answers, right? Like we know what worked for us. We have some frameworks. Ultimately, it is up to you, but we're happy to help you think through those things and help and be helpful where we can. So that's I think all we got for materials. Thank you guys for your time.
Here or online, please post them in chat online and raise your hand here.
In the back.
You guys spoke a bit about marketing. Have you experimented at all with like AI generated content or AI influencers as an acquisition channel?
Want to take that?
Yeah, historically not too much. The technology has always been uncanny valley, but it's starting to get better and better. And I'm seeing just this week some really strong examples. So it's something that we probably will explore just to see how it performs. But in general, most of our product is very human led, and so we tend to lean towards real humans.
So it's kind of a dissonant approach is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like another, this is very brand specific, but since we have humans in our brand, like we won't even say the term AI in our marketing unless if we're explicitly like bashing it and saying like humans are better than AI in these ways. Obviously behind the scenes and in the operations of the company, we use AI all over the freaking place, right? But the brand of the company is very human forward, very, we'll meet you where you are, we'll be an ally, we'll be a companion, right? Which is very antagonistic with the idea of being like a utilitarian automated AI tool, right? So it's a good question though. Yep.
People are like the average like everyday consumers.
Yep.
Also like have like business partnerships or directly advertise to like gyms and have like those type of partnerships as well? And have you seen like more traction and growth in your business by going like B2B over B2C?
Great question. We've definitely have tried to crack B2B over the years. Like it has it's one of the 19, right? And so we've done our tests there. In the early days, a lot of those tests were with gyms. And again, it's super dependent on the business. So don't take this for canon for your own business. But for us, the gyms just didn't work as a channel because of, I'd say, fundamentally a conflict of interest where gyms make a lot of their money from in-person personal training. And so even if at the corporate level, the gym was interested in more revenue and more a new product, at the actual gym level, everyone running that gym was basically a personal trainer, and we were pretty much coming for their job and their, their income by saying we can do this at a tenth the price at a higher quality. No one really likes to hear that. And so that was a hard wall we hit with gyms. Lately, there's been more success. We've gotten some large contracts now with the Air Force to try to train them. We've done some stuff with GLP-1s and health clinics. We have some deals in the works with large digital fitness players. So yes, but to date, the vast majority of our growth has come from direct-to-consumer channels.
The first customer, we need to get them manually. How long it takes you to get them?
You probably remember
Like
better
how
than
long
I
did
do.
it actually take us to get, or
Yeah.
in general?
Or just how long did you end journal?
Okay, yeah. So I mean, like I had said, the first customer I got for the business was my sister, so that took like
A year.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't instant. I did have to convince her, literally. It wasn't
It
like,
is $100 a month product, also for context. Yeah.
but after that, we put together, it probably was a couple weeks before we started to get like non-family and friends, like some people that were within our network, but we didn't know directly. There was also the instance of setting up a table and giving out a bunch of free Apple Watches, which worked really well.
Yeah.
Because who doesn't want a free Apple Watch? But
Yeah, there was definitely a few phases of like I have a few core memories of like, yeah, giving out the Apple Watches. Was that really acquiring customers? Like, or was that just bribing people to use our products? Like, I don't know. Like,
some of them are still using
yeah,
it.
some of them still are using it.
5.5
Have we
years.
broken even on them even
Yeah.
now? I don't know. But like one that will always stand out is like one of the tests we did was we had reached out to the local NPR station to tell them about our thing. We reached out to a bunch of things, to be clear, and they just happened to respond and say, yeah, this is cool. We'll take a look at it. They came, did like an audio interview with us in the garage right behind the screen. And we were so excited, and that article came out, and I think like one person maybe signed up that day when that article came out, and we were just like, oh my God, like some random person is paying us $100 for this. Like, this is crazy. And we're like freaking out, like looking at the revenue graph go, boop, up to 100, right? So yeah, like that's one that sticks out of my mind as being one of the first true like random, we had no idea who they were. But like, yeah, the first probably like 50 before that were all like friends or friends of friends or friends of family kind of things, or friends of trainers, or yeah, all that. Yep.
I was wondering if it's because of the fact that I know it's cheaper than like personal trainers, but
Yep.
because of the fact it's $100 app, like, do you guys have to go through any market education, well, like trying to acquire your customers?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like we definitely struggle to get a lot of the like very quick impression channels to work well. Like TikTok, we've really struggled to get to work. Not because there's a lack of eyeballs, obviously, but because it's really hard to build enough conviction to pull the trigger on $100 a month personal training experience that starts with an hour-long phone call with a personal trainer, when you just watch like a 15-second piece of content. So unsurprisingly, the pieces of content that convert the most customers for us generally are these like 10 to 30-minute YouTube videos where people are taking you through the whole journey, the whole experience. They're showing you the human conversation they're having with their trainer. They're talking about all these different ups and downs of the journey. And after you see all of that, then even then it's like a fraction of a percent of the people who watch that content still are the ones who actually subscribe, right? So really big funnel, millions of subscribers. tell a really, really good story. And even then the best videos will get 1,000 signups, right? Which is a lot, but not a lot compared to how many views and stuff they're getting. Yep.
Hey, thanks for sharing. It's been good so far. I'd love to hear about team size in the early stages of this. I mean, I can imagine talking to 1 or 10 people and like getting them excited enough to like try whatever weird thing I'm doing.
Yep.
But like, how did you arrive at hiring the first person, or when did you realize, oh man, this is bigger than me, I need to bring people in, and how did you get that?
Yep. So yeah, we definitely, well, so me and my co-founder Gabe, we were both very technical. We did definitely not have this framework in our heads. And so we recognized once we had a product and we had been kind of stumbling around in the world with it for a few months, we definitely recognized that we needed help from someone who was just going to really own the whole thing top to bottom of like figuring out the initial growth. So we started looking for that person. Obviously, relatively quickly, we got super lucky and we found John. But then once we had John, like that team of me, Gabe, and John, and like one trainer, literally, that was the team that more or less took us to $1 million a year in revenue. Like we were very strict about, we didn't see any need to hire engineers because we weren't experts at building apps, but we were just good enough to like keep it going. And we definitely didn't feel any need to hire growth people because growth wasn't working yet. And we had John trying to figure out all the different channels, right? And we had some, like from a funding perspective, we had raised around 500K of like angel checks and competition winnings and McGinnis and Venture Bridge and all these things. So we had some money to like pay John a little salary, right? And like fund some of these ad tests, but yeah. Yeah.
I had a box in my house and a friend.
Yeah.
Said I had $500,000.
Yeah, isn't Carnegie Mellon amazing? Yeah. So yeah, we tricked people into giving us $500,000 without a functioning product simply because we seemed smart. And I'm sure all of you guys could do the same. Like I guess just to talk, obviously it's a little off topic, but to talk about how we did that. Angel investors don't invest in your company because it's a good company. They invest in you as a person because they want to hang out with you. They want to vicariously experience the journey again a lot of times. And so like we had angel investors who we had met through, probably events like this, right? And we took him to the gym. I texted him every day. I just like hung out with him. I was like, check out this new screen we tried, check out this new channel we tried. And like most of these guys and girls had been entrepreneurs before. And they just loved it. They were like, this is awesome. Like, Matt's so cool. Like, wow, like we're hanging out with the cool new kids on the block, right? Like, and to be clear, we were not actually cool. They just thought we were cool. And that's all that mattered, right? So when the time came when we were like, oh yeah, like we just got whatever, 25K from winning McGinnis, basically organically, someone said, hey, like, how about I write you like a 75K check? And we were like, sure, like that'd be awesome. Like, and they said, oh, how's a whatever $5 million valuation sound? Sure, like that's insane. We're worth literally nothing on paper. Like, right, well, now we're worth $5 million, right? And that's just the way that this early stuff works, right? It's all just about the team, the passion, the potential, but no product, no revenue, none of that. Just we were friends with them and they trusted us. Yeah.
Traction would you say like you had to show for whenever you first started getting funds?
Very different for angels versus VC. The angels, again, like pretty much nothing. Like if you find an angel who truly trusts you and like you would be friends with them in the real world outside of the business world, you know, they should be willing to give you some amount of money simply on the premise, right? Obviously, if they don't believe the market is good, if they don't believe you are capable, they're not going to give you money. But if they believe you're capable and they believe you're trying to solve a really big problem, there are definitely a pool of people who will give you money simply for that, because they're dreamers, just like you are, right? For VCs, I tried to raise from VCs with, a few $1,000s a year of revenue and some very initial signals and some the same kind of energy. And basically, for me at least, it didn't work. Some people, especially second time, third time, fourth time entrepreneurs, can pull off that same strategy that I just described for angels with VCs, because they're like, yeah, I've done this before, man. Like, don't you trust me? And they're like, yeah, I trust you. Here's 5 million. Like, it's all good, right? But like, it's really hard to pull that off as at the time, 20-year-old first time founder, right? So I failed at least once, like officially, to raise a round. Just no traction. No one came forward. No one gave me a term sheet. Then fast forward time to when we were, I don't know if I'll have to go all the way back to the slide, but basically it was when this was happening, and we found the first few things that worked for growth, and we jumped from like a few $1,000s of revenue to hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue, almost $1 million of revenue. That was what catalyzed the very first venture round. So as a first time founder, especially in direct to consumer, especially in the current market, I would say you probably need hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue, if not $1 million of revenue, to really have a strong shot at raising like a meaningful venture round. And to me, that's like a few $1 million. We raised a $3 million round. If you wanted to raise 300K from some small pre-seed fund, it's a different story. That's more of the angel investor bucket in my mind. But if you want a real seed round, essentially, I think you need some real revenue numbers to bring to the table. Yep.
So you have said that you have tried like 90 channels. And A/B testing, you mentioned, again, A/B testing is like a fine line because you're holding off some customers, so you're probably losing revenue. So what was your guiding principle when you were like testing, let's say adding something onto your product, and even trying a new channel? So what was your guiding principle to say, look, I'm not going to pursue with this approach because it's not, like what was your guiding principle there?
Yeah, it depends on the complexity. If it was something as simple as let's try this new ad, let's try this new variation of the first page that someone sees. With stuff like that, we could use that like 3 to 5 CAC range. So like for us, the cost to acquire a customer, let's say it's $100, we would spend $500 of ad spend behind some new ad. And if we saw even one person sign up from that, we would say, oh, maybe there's potential here. Like let's iterate it some more. Let's try some more stuff. If we spent 500 and we didn't see any signal of it really clicking, we would just kill it and move on to the next thing. Obviously, when you're changing the product and you're like building a whole new feature to test some new thing, you're going to want to give it more of a shot than just $500 of ad spend. Like with those things, we would measure consumer behavior and engagement over multiple weeks, even months in some cases, to really understand, like, does this change to the product truly cause people to refer more or do more workouts or whatever it may be, cancel less, right? Those things just take a lot more time to measure. Yep.
One question. Okay, the first angel investor, which kind of things convince the investor to invest you?
Yeah, I think in our case it was just me and my co-founder, and like the fact that it was indisputable that we were trying really, really hard. Were we trying the right things? No. Did we have any idea what we were doing? No. But it was like, two 20-year-old, very smart on paper, technical co-founders who had a huge passion for fitness. And we gave off the aura of, we are inevitable, right? Like no matter what happens, we're going to win in the fitness space. Like you might not believe me now, but like you're going to wish you invested in me 10 years from now, right? And we had that from the very, very beginning. So yeah, it was no revenue number, no product demo, like none of that, right? That was all shit. It was just who we were and like the energy we had. Like I'm sure you guys have all met people and you meet them and you're like, they're gonna be something. Like that person is different, right? So like figure out what that means for you. It's different for everyone, and like lean into that. And because if an investor, an angel investor, walks away from their first meeting and that the first thing they want to do is call their buddy and be like, "I just met the next us," like essentially is what you want them to say, right? And if they believe that, they're gonna give you money, because why wouldn't they bet on like themselves, right? Sorry, can you repeat that? Meet them? Yeah. So for us, it was almost entirely through the Carnegie Mellon network, which was great. We had both the Carnegie Mellon network and the MIT network, and honestly, the MIT network was like shit in comparison. So we did McGinnis, which was some people, but then really for us, it was VentureBridge, I would say, which is the accelerator that Alex was just talking about. VentureBridge gave us, I think it was like 4 mentors who had sort of ahead of time raised their hand and said like, yeah, this company is like interesting to me. Like I want to help them. So there was this like opt-in mentors. We got like 4 of them. And 3 of those 4, it wasn't immediate, but after months and months and months of working with these mentors and showing them who we were and what we were fighting for, 3 of those 4 mentors ended up directly investing. And then once someone invests, they have a super strong incentive to introduce you to all their friends who are also rich. And so like once we had one angel investor, it was like, yeah, come to my HOA party in whatever bougie town in California it was, right? And oh, this is Jeremy and this is his wife and da, 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 da. And before you know it, you've got like, 50 people all kind of part of the same like club. And it wasn't easy, to be clear. Like it took many, many months, if not years, to like develop some of these relationships to the point where they were willing to give me money. That you don't want to go to them and just say, hey, I heard you're an angel investor. I heard you're like wealthy. Like we're looking for a round right now, like 25K. Like, how does that sound? Like, that's never going to work. It was more like, hey, I'm Matt. Like, your buddy invested, right? Would love to hang out. Would love to take you to the gym. Haha, like I'll show you how to lift, right? Like, whatever it is for you, like some shared connection point, right? And I would just become their friend. And I would text them every day. I would send them memes, like, like I would just become friends with them. And then when the time came, most of the time they came to me and they were like, hey Matt, like I was just wondering, like is there any room in the next round for me? Like I've got like 50K I've been trying to put into something cool and like I really like you guys. And you're like, actually, we can do that right now. Here's the paperwork, right? And then you can get the money.
Thank you.
Yeah, yep. Yep.
Cheaper.
The timing was a big thing. When the company started, I was still a student. So that was 2018, 2019. So I was going into my junior year of undergrad. And so I had to stay here to take classes. By the time we graduated, we had hired John and we had hired our first trainer in Pittsburgh. And so because we couldn't leave Pittsburgh for school, so like we had made some commitment to Pittsburgh, and then COVID happened. And so then it was like, doesn't matter where we are, like nothing is happening in person. And so that's when we started hiring people all over the country. And then by the time COVID kind of calmed down and things went somewhat back to normal, we already had a fully remote team. And so then it was like, you can work wherever you want. I personally just like Pittsburgh. It's cheap. I think it's a good balance of techie, but not being crazy big and expensive. But, to each their own. I just saw a question from Zoom here. What percentage of OpEx do we commit for advertising? OpEx is just operational expenses. Too much. Right now, it's about 50 to 60% of all of our non-variable costs are going to marketing spend of some kind, which is pretty high. It depends on the company. Some companies like Duolingo, for example, even today, it's probably like 1%. For us, it's always been pretty high because we spend a lot to grow.
But if any of you guys in person have questions, you're welcome to come up to Matt and John, assuming they can stick around for a little while.
Yeah.
For those who
Yep.
joined us virtually, thank you so much. And again, this will be uploaded to YouTube, and you can always find the presentation on the Connects archives page, which is adjacent to the Connects website. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.